Meeting of the West Basin Municipal Water District Board. And for determination of the quorum, I will turn it over to the general manager.
Yes, thank you very much. Director Don Deere. Here. Director Gloria Gray.
Here.
Director Harold Williams. Here. Vice President Desi Alvarez.
Here.
President Scott Houston. Mr. Vice President, we have a quorum.
Okay. So moving on, we'll do the Pledge of Allegiance, and Director Deere is going to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance today.
We have a pledge to our flag. Ready? Begin. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, next item is public comment. Do we have anybody that's wishing to address the board today, Mr. General Manager?
Mr. Vice President, we have not received any requests for public comment for today's meeting, though this meeting is being held both in person and virtually. If we have any virtual guests that would like to make public comment, please indicate so by raising your virtual hand. And Mr. Vice President, I do not see any requests.
Okay, the next item up is presentations, and I do not believe we have any formal presentations today. But I do want to, under presentations, make a recognition. I think we all thought about this a bit more, maybe had a resolution available for today. Today is a very special day in the history of this country. Today is actually the day. It was August 28th, 60 years ago, that the March on Washington took place, and that Dr. Martin Luther King gave the I Have a Dream speech, which is probably one of the greater speeches on record, historical record. And although this country's made a lot of progress in the intervening 60 years, a lot of the issues that were discussed and brought up in that speech are still present today. And I want to recognize this board because I think in the past year, we have taken actions to help close that gap that we're still striving to close as a country. And that has been done by making a commitment to diversity and equity, and it's made into a commitment to creating more opportunities for both our staff, our vendors, and just the general public. One of the key issues in that was just opportunities. If you read that speech, and everybody should read it periodically, there are some things that are worth reading twice and three times. It's all about creating opportunities and having people strive to then achieve and have the chance to take advantage of those opportunities. I always say that as long as you can see the golden ring and be able to reach for it, then it's just how far and how much stretching do you have to do to get there. And some of us have to do more than others, but that always has to be there. And then somebody has to make sure that that opportunity is there. And I think this board has made that commitment, and I think that this board needs to be recognized for that today. Thank you.
Thank you.
For allowing me to say that. If any other directors would like to make any comments, please feel free to do so.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a comment. You know, there's a lot said about I Have a Dream speech by Dr. King. But I think what's more powerful than his speech that day is the preamble to the speech. I don't know if many of you have read or heard the preamble, but if you have a chance, please, I would cite it, but I mess it up. So, but it is very powerful. It is a reason why I continue to go on. I was a little kid back then, but it was very powerful. We had a very impactful, it was very impactful to me. So if you do, please get a hold of the preamble, because the preamble is amazing. Thank you.
Okay, so with that, we will move on to the, items, too late to be agendized. I don't believe there are any.
We have none.
We will move on to the consent calendar. And,
I'll move approval of the consent calendar.
okay, we have a second for the consent calendar.
I'm sorry.
Director Deere moved the consent calendar. I was going to say, is there a second?
Second.
Okay. It's been seconded by Director Williams. I do want to make a couple of statements, or not statements, just indicate that I will be voting no on several items, and the items that I will be voting no on are items 7D, 7E, 7F. And then I probably should have done this before the motion, but on item 7I, I am going to withdraw that item from the consent calendar. And there is a closed session item that covers that topic. So we will be bringing that item back later after the closed session item is discussed. Okay, so with that, there's a motion on the floor to move the consent calendar as is, with the exception of 7I. So we'll take a vote on that now.
Happy to do that, Mr. Vice President, but I do also want to clarify. What I heard, we're going to do them all. However, you would like to vote no on items 7D, 7E, and 7F.
Yeah, correct.
And we would withdraw I.
Right.
Okay. Director Don Deere,
Yes.
Director Gloria Gray,
Yes.
Director Harold Williams,
Yes.
Vice President Desi Alvarez,
Yes. With the exceptions of.
President Scott Houston.
Okay, then moving on to the agenda, our next item is the action calendar. And the first item on the action calendar is authorizing a letter of support for tree people and the Theodore Payne Foundation's Regional Resilience Planning Grant application. So, Mr. General Manager, would you like to introduce that item, please?
Happy to do that, Mr. Vice President. This item was brought to us under a request from our friends and the Tree People organization, and they have requested a support position on an upcoming grant application. As is customary, we bring these before the board for the board to act, and then of course provide that support letter if they choose to. For this presentation, we have Tammy Hurley. Hi.
Thank you, Jay. Good afternoon, directors. So yes, this item is being brought to you today to request your consideration of approving a letter to support a grant application that will be submitted by Tree People and Theodore Payne Foundation. And these organizations are partnering to develop a program that would support regional efforts in transforming native landscapes. And this grant opportunity comes from the Governor's Office of Planning and Research. They recently announced availability of funding for round 1 of the Regional Resilience Planning and Implementation Grant Program. And through that office, it's through the Office of Planning and Research, through the Integrated Climate Adaptation and Resiliency Program, also referred to as ICARP. It administers those funds, and they receive the funds through the California Budget Act of 2021 to implement the provision of grants. If that grant would be awarded, the program would be designed to create resources for industry practitioners that would advance the use of nature-based solutions such as best management practices and recommended species list for trees and native plants. So this would also include the propagation of trees and native plants to ensure a full supply in the near future for the nurseries. This program would also convene a network of practitioners, research agencies, and public agencies across the region to share information, challenges, and opportunities, and advance policies related to native landscape transformation. So to support this effort, 3 people had requested a letter of support from West Basin Municipal Water District in order to show support for the program and the grant application. So a copy of that letter is included in the board memo, in the board packet, and I would be happy to address any questions that you may have, and I'll go ahead and read the recommendation. So the recommendation is that the board consider authorizing the general manager to submit a letter to support 3 People and Theodore Payne Foundation's application requesting grant funding through the Regional Resilience Planning and Implementation Grant Program.
Thank you, Tammy. Do we have any questions?
I'll move we support it.
Second.
Okay. I have a question / comment. Do you know who else is supporting? Oh, Director Gray, I'm sorry.
The potential for me to help you.
No questions, thank you.
I was like, I should preface it by saying it's not that I'm
Um,
an expert. It was like,
In addition to us writing a letter of support, do you know other agencies that are doing this?
I do not have a list of the agencies who are also sending a support letter. I can obtain that. I know that they were going to ask other organizations for support. I just don't know who would be.
I'm just asking you because I'm sure that they're seeking support and there's going to be, the grant will be used throughout the county, not just within our district
Of course.
boundaries. I know that we've worked with them in the past. I would encourage that you continue to work with them. And one of the items that we talked a lot, we have a fairly aggressive program for turf removal and just enhancing the native environment. Recently, last week, Metropolitan approved a program for funding urban trees replacement. And I'd like to see us take advantage of that, but maybe also when 3 People gets moving on this, if we can look at that and focus in those areas that are really tree deficient. We have parts of this community, of our service area that have a lot of trees, but we have a lot that are very, pretty much deserts, concrete islands, concrete oceans, I should say. Okay, with that, we'll take a vote.
Director Don Deere,
Yes.
Director Gloria Gray,
Yes,
Director Harold Williams,
Yes.
Vice President Desi Alvarez,
Yes.
President Scott Houston.
Okay, the next item up is the ratification of the recycled water distribution repairs in Carson.
Mr. Vice President, if I could quickly ask a clarifying question. We did include the draft letter of support in there. Do you have a preference as to whether the letter signed by the board president or from the general manager?
I have no preference, but since the board president is not here, I'll defer to the board president to make that decision upon his return.
Apologize.
So the next item is the ratification of the recycled water distribution repairs in Carson.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Vice President. This item 8B will have a presentation, and our presentation is from Frank Fuchs, our operations supervisor.
Thank you, EJ. Good afternoon, directors. If you could please refer to page 285 of your board packet. In early June of this year, a recycled water leak was identified from a 12-inch recycled water pipeline on Main Street in Carson. The board memo does have an attachment on page 288, which shows a map of the location of the pipeline repair for reference as well. The site is on Main Street, just south of Torrance Boulevard. The recycled water leak was isolated when it was first identified, but we couldn't tell if the road was compromised And we also had customers downstream that didn't have recycled water once it was isolated. So due to the critical nature of the work, staff instructed Infomark, the West Basin distribution contract operator, to implement the repairs following the West Basin Administrative Code for the procurement of critical goods and services. Infomark initially contracted 2 contractors to respond, but they only received a response from J.A. Salazar Construction. In order to implement the work immediately, the work was directed to be implemented on a time and material basis by J.A. Salazar. We didn't know what the repair entailed until having to excavate to locate the leak. Initially, it was thought that the leak would be from a 45-degree joint. However, the leak was eventually found from a broken push-on joint in the pipeline. The total cost of the leak repairs, which includes the Infomark 10% markup on subcontractor fees, was $53,282.38. With that, I'll read the recommendation. The recommendation is that staff requests that the board ratify the expenditures for the repair of a 12-inch pipeline near 2824 Main Street in Carson in the amount of $53,282.38. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, any questions from the board? We have a motion to approve.
I approve staff's recommendation.
Second motion.
Okay, we'll vote on this.
Director Don Deere,
Yes.
Director Gloria Gray,
yes,
Director Harold Williams,
Yes.
Vice President Desi Alvarez,
Yes,
and President Scott Houston.
the next item, and the item from the consent calendar that was withdrawn, are 2 items that are affected by some of the items for discussion in closed session. So I'm going to defer those items for the time being. And in order to just move this meeting in an expeditious fashion, I'm going to jump to item number 9, the information calendar. And does anybody have any questions on the information calendar?
Well, thank you.
Do you have any questions regarding the information calendar?
No.
Director Nera? Director Gray, do you have any questions on the information calendar? Okay, so the information calendar is, well, do we have a motion to receive and file the
There's
information?
nothing there on my agenda.
Huh?
Am I reading the wrong agenda?
Well, all of our information items, because there's nothing new, have been
Oh.
placed in the receive and file.
Understand.
Okay,
Okay.
so
Yeah,
let's.
I'll make the motion to
let's-
receive and file item 10.
Second.
So we have a motion to, and a second to move items 9 and 10. Let's take a roll.
Director Don Deere,
Yes.
Director Gloria Gray,
yes,
Director Harold Williams,
Yes.
Vice President Desi Alvarez,
Yes.
President Scott Houston.
Okay, then we're going to move to item number 14, in closed session. So Mr. General Counsel, would you like to introduce that?
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. We'll move into closed session for the items that are stated on the agenda, which are conference with legal counsel, anticipated litigation, 5 cases, and conference with real property negotiators for the property identified. Come back and have an open session item back to number 8C.
Okay. All right, with that, we'll be going into closed session.
Hello? Hello?
Our Director Gray will be starting in just a few minutes.
Thank you so much.
We are.
Okay, we are out of closed session. Mr. General Counsel, would you please report on closed session activities?
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. There's no action taken during closed session as reported.
So then we have two items pending, and the first item is item 7I, which is the agreement for the supply of nitrified and boiler feed recycled water to the Torrance Refining Company. And Mr. General Manager, would you like to introduce that item?
Yes, Mr. Vice President, actually brings me some excitement to bring this item for you today. Item 7I, agreements for the study of the nitrified and boiler feed recycled water to the Torrance Refining Company LLC. This item was brought before the Finance and Administration Committee and was approved at that time with a recommendation to support staff's recommendation. For this presentation, we have Barka Masurlian, our Executive Manager of Engineering and Operations.
Thank you, EJ. Directors.
Let me apologize, Barca, but if, on this one, if you can give a really quick presentation. I think we.
You got it. The item calls for extensions of 3 current agreements with the City of Torrance and 3 agreements with the Torrance Refinery, Refining Company, and 1 agreement with the City of Torrance. The extensions pertain to the supply of nitrified and boiler feed recycled water. One agreement for nitrified, one agreement for the boiler feed, and another agreement for the lease. West Basin staff, city staff, and refinery staff are conducting good faith negotiations about a master, to put together a master agreement. But the parties agreed to give ourselves a little bit more time to extend the current agreements for a period of 1 year. The copies of the extensions are provided in attachments A, B, and C on packet pages 195, 198, and 202. In the 1 year extensions, there are provisions that will allow West Basin to reconcile the costs of service, and also provisions that talk about the capital project investment as well. That's the short version of the report. The recommendation is staff recommends that the board authorize the general manager to execute the 3 amendments provided in attachments A, B, and C, extending the current lease agreement and continuing the supply of nitrified and boiler feed recycled water to the Torrance Refinery through August 31st, 2024. Happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you very much. Does the board have any questions?
Thank you.
Director Gray, do you have any questions on this one? Okay, do I have a motion?
thank you. No, I do not. Thank you.
A motion to approve the recommendation.
So moved.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Can we take a roll call vote, please?
Director Don Deere,
Yes.
Director Gloria Gray,
Yes.
Director Harold Williams,
Yes.
Vice President Desi Alvarez,
Yes.
President Scott Houston.
Okay, and our last item is item 8C, which is authorization to issue requests for bids for the Title 22 filters rehab and replacement project. So, Mr. General Manager, would you like to introduce this particular item?
Happy to do so. This item before you, item 8C, was brought before the Engineering Operations Committee earlier this month. This item was moved to the full board without a recommendation from the committee. So for today's presentation, we have Orlando Rodriguez, our senior engineer.
Good afternoon, directors. You can find a copy of the staff report on page 289 of your agenda packet. But right now, we'd just like to ask you to turn to page 296 for a copy of the presentation.
Orlando, if I can interrupt you, also, I think that this board's seen a lot of this presentation at a previous board meeting, several board meetings ago now. So maybe you can go through it a little quickly and let's get right down to the alternative that we
Sure.
consider. And
Yeah. Well, I'll start if it's okay with the board. If you want to turn to page 308, this is just a summary on the potable water supplement, and we'll get into the alternatives there. So just to kind of give some background information, the Title 22 water is the source water for irrigation customers and our satellite plants that then refine it further. So when there isn't enough source water, Title 22 water that's being sent, we then tend to supplement with potable water. So in this case, this is just a summary of fiscal year 21-22 on the potable water supplement. And you see a column for the Chevron Electrification Treatment Plant, JMN plant, as well as the Torrance Refinery and Water Recycling Plant. So in summary, for fiscal year 21-22, we essentially lost about $2.5 million in recycled water sales because of the amount of potable water supplement that we had to obtain. And just to kind of put a little bit of an environmental impact on that, that's almost the equivalent of about 11,000 typical households, which is a household of 4. So I think by doing this project, we want to reduce this as much as possible. So I just wanted to point this out first before we get into the alternatives. So next slide, please. So for this project, we are proposing three alternatives. Alternative one being that we would do the comprehensive R&R on the 11 remaining filters. We have done work on 3 previous filters, filters 2, 8, and 9, and there's a total of 14. So this alternative would focus on those 11 remaining filters. We would do all of them at one time. And this alternative would increase the reliability of the filters by limiting their inoperable, or making them inoperable, and also providing the best customer service. This does have the highest initial capital expenditure since we're doing all of them up front. But it would be the fastest, and it would take about a year to complete 12 months of construction for alternative one. Alternative two would be to perform an R&R on 3 offline filters only, 6, 11, and 13, and essentially take a more of a reactive approach in then performing a rehab on the 8 remaining filters. Once they're deemed inoperable, in essence, there's an under-drain failure of some sort, we would then perform the R&R on that filter, or multiple filters if there's multiple ones that have failed. And this would extend the useful life, actually the same as alternative one, sorry, I forgot to mention. By replacing the filters, it would extend the useful life of all 11 filters. And then essentially extend the useful life of each filter as we perform the work. So this alternative here does have a less upfront cost, initial capital expenditure, but it does come with the risk as we will be performing an R&R as the filters are deemed inoperable. So, it would be an interruption, we would perform the work, and then it would bring it back online. And this alternative here would take approximately about 8 years, 8 to 9 years to complete, just given the history of the failures that we see at the facility.
Question, is this alternative, this fixes all 8, all 11 filters now?
Alternative one only does that. Alternative two would only fix the 3 offline filters right now at ECL. And we would just take a reactive approach. As they become inoperable, then we would fix them. And then last but not least, alternative 3 here would be more of a proactive approach in programming the R&R for these filters. We would do about 2 filters a year. There's 11 remaining, so it would take us approximately 6 years to complete, and extend the useful life of those filters by 20 years as we do the work. So this alternative here does have the least initial capital expenditure because we're just going to do 2 filters a year, but it does come with a higher total cost. Go ahead.
So question, both alternative 2 and alternative 3 are similar. Alternative 2, you fix 3 filters now.
Yes.
That are offline. But why then, there are 8 remaining? Why program them over 8 years versus programming them over a shorter period of time, such as you do with alternative 3, where you're doing 2 every year?
Well, alternative 2, we would only perform a rehab once they become inoperable. So we would essentially, just given the history of the filters themselves, it's been about a failure at least once a year. So once they become inoperable, we would only perform the work then. We won't program them. It's more of a reactive approach to it. Where alternative 2, we essentially do 2 a year until we finish the 11 remaining filters. So that's the difference there. It's just taking as essentially just assuming that 1 a year, just given the timeline of the filter failures, it'll be about 1 a year. So just in that span, we would just do them one by one as they fail. I mean, we can program them, but that's essentially alternative 3. It's just programming 2 a year.
Well, the biggest difference, as I see it, is that there's 3 filters that are offline now, and they would be repaired, or replaced, rebuilt, basically, immediately.
Yes. Yeah, so this one would just take us longer to do. I think we're right.
But it could be done similarly to alternative 3.
Yes, we could do, I guess, 3 filters now and then 2
and 2 and 2.
Yeah, take us 4 years to do that. Kind of. Next slide, please. So this just shows the alternative cost comparison from 1, 2, and 3. As you can see, some of the items have been completed. We have done design work. There is a construction bid package out that's complete. So in essence, the construction is essentially what's left. So for alternative 1, the initial capital expenditure being that we're doing all 11 now is the highest out of the 3. It's about $5.6 million. Alternative 2, which will do 3 filters now, has an initial capital expenditure of about $2 million. And then alternative 3, 2 filters now, and then programming the rest, has about an initial capital expenditure of $1.6 million. And at the very bottom, you'll see the kind of total cost comparison. For alternative 1, it being the same, since we're doing all 11 filters now, it doesn't change from the initial capital expenditure. But once you go into alternative 2, because it does take us a span of 9 years to do all of them, the 3 now and the 8 remaining, it does cost us more money to do that, almost about $8.5 million over that span. And then for alternative 3, 2 a year, and we're looking at about 6.6 million, just taking us over that time, increasing.
So alternative 2, though, instead of 9 years that you did, what we talked about earlier, more like alternative 3, do 3 now and then do the others over the next 4 years instead of 6, we'll probably drop that number. It's got to be between the 6 and the 5, and probably a lot closer to the 5.
That is true. Yeah, it would take us 4 years, and it would be somewhere in between alternative 1 and 2. All right. Next slide, please. Here, just going over the project cost versus the potential payback for alternative 1, being that it does have highest initial capital expenditure, and also because we're doing all 11 filters, we do believe that this has the highest possibility of reducing our potable water supplement, somewhere hopefully between the range of 25% and 75%. So with that being said, if we're able to reduce potable water supplement by, let's say, 75%, the potential project payback would take us about 3 years. If we achieve a reduction in potable water supplement by, let's say, 25%, and that's the higher number there, it'll take us about 7.5 years for potential project payback. Next slide, please. Here is alternative 2, same assumptions here, but I think the key difference here is that because this is more of a programmed route, we don't expect to achieve the highest amount of potable water reduction of 75%, just because we're taking a more reactive approach. So we're hoping to reduce the potable water consumption here, let's say anywhere between 25 and 50%. So what's being shown here is the potential project payback of that initial capital expenditure, and that will take us about 3 years. And then for the total cost of the project itself, the $8.5 million, we expect a potential project payback of about 10 years for this alternative. Slide, please. Last but not least, here is alternative 3. This being somewhere in between alternative 1 and 2. We program 2 a year. We do expect also a reduction, hopefully somewhere between the range of 25 to 50%. So assuming that we achieve a reduction of about 50% here, we're hoping to get a project payback of about 4 years in 4 years' time. And then we're able to reduce our potable water supplement by 25%. That's looking more about 8 years to get a potential project payback.
And then if we talk about that one, that's the in between alternative 2 and 3, going back to actually page 312. It's not going to be a 10-year payback. It's going to be something less than that 8 that you're showing.
Yeah.
And the more immediate one is the 3 years.
Yeah,
So that really is the kind of threading the needle between those. Okay.
Next slide, please. So here, just kind of a recap of each alternative, going back to alternative 1, 2, and 3. And based on the information on the potential project paybacks, staff is recommending that we do implement alternative 1. As previously stated, it does have the lowest total cost over time, and also increases the reliability of all the filters up front, since we're doing all the construction upfront, decreases the potential service interruptions to our customers, and also reduces the possibility of any major future repairs moving forward.
Next slide, please.
And here just showing a preliminary project schedule. Like PJ mentioned, we did go to the ENO committee and then presenting here today in August. If we do get authorization for a request for bids, we would go into solicitation next month in September. Then hoping to award the project in November of this year. And then as stated, it will take us approximately 12 months to complete alternative one for all the filters, sealable filters. So it'll take us into late next year, November, December timeframe to finish everything.
And next slide.
And at this point, I would like to read the recommendation that the board authorize the general manager to issue a request for bids for the Title 22 filters rehabilitation and replacement project, alternative one, for construction services and construction management services. And at this point, I'd be happy to answer any questions from the board.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Do we have any questions?
I'd like to make a motion, recommendation to a motion.
Okay, you're making a motion. And your motion is,
Oh, read it to you? It's right. He just read it.
it's the staff recommendation.
Yeah.
If there's no second to that, I would like to consider
I'll
an
second it.
alternative. Oh, okay. I would like then to make a substitute motion. And my motion would be as follows. That we authorize the project to replace 3 filters now and to then complete the replacement of the remaining 8 filters over the next 4 years. That would have been the hybrid that was, if we can go back to packet page, what page is that? Anyways, it's the alternative cost comparison graph.
$310.
It is packet page. Yeah. So on that one, it really is between alternative 2, $2 million now that replaces all 3 filters. And then when you accelerate, instead of replacing the rest over 9 years, you do it over 4 years, as opposed to 6 years in alternative 3. You end up with pretty close to a project that's going to give you a quick payback. So if we can go to the graph that shows the payback time on that one, that is on packet page 312. It's 3-year payback. The 10 years out front won't be there because it's going to be a little bit less than shown on packet page 313 for the 3-year one. And it gives us some more time for any other potential changes that might come along.
Is there a second on this motion?
This is my alternative motion.
Do you have a second?
I don't know if I have one. I'm making the motion.
You're
So I was
discussing the motion.
explaining it.
You're discussing the motion without it.
I'm just trying to explain it.
Yeah, I think he's just trying to give additional information as to what's in it.
So that is my alternative motion on that part. And then I have a second part of the alternative motion. There's another item in there that has to do with the concrete repairs. And I was going to say, if we can make that an additive alternate, as opposed to a base part of the bid, an additive alternate.
I'll second that.
Thank you. So we have a substitute motion on the floor that's been seconded. Is there any other discussion or is there any questions?
I have no objection
Yes,
to this motion myself, but I'll vote for it.
Okay.
I do have a question. Can you hear me?
Ma'am,
Hello?
just Director Gray, I'm sorry.
Right, yeah. I was actually trying to second the first motion, but I did hear you before I heard your substitute. But how does your substitute motion compare to what staff is recommending? If it works, I'm really interested in making sure that it works for staff. So I have a question to the general manager about the substitute motion. Will that work for staff based on what the issues are?
I think it would resolve, I think, Director Gray, I think it would resolve the issue. Obviously, it would take more time rather than the immediacy of doing all 11 right now, which was alternative 1. But what I'm looking at now is if you look at the cost of alternative 3 and alternative 2, as Director Alvarez has pointed out, you would bring down those costs. You would also get it done quicker. I did have a question, Director Gray, if I could ask that of Director Alvarez. What I thought I heard you say was that you liked the 3 filters now of alternative 2.
Mhm.
And then you said if you were to do the 2 per year, you would have it completed within the 4
4
years.
years instead of 6.
So would that mean that we would do 5 in year 1, 2 in year 2, 2 in year 3, and 2 in year 4?
However, it adds up to get you the additional 8.
Okay.
If you go with alternative 3, it was going to be 2, 2, 2, and 2 over 6 years. This time you're doing 3 up front. There's only 5 left to be done.
No, there would be 8 left to be done.
I'm sorry, 8 to be done. And if you did 2, 2, and 2, you could do them in 4 years.
It adds up to 5. Well, that was going to be my same question. If 3 is in the first year, then there's 8, 2 years, that's 4. So a total of 5 years.
Yes.
Unless we do what EJ was saying, if you add the first 2 to the 3, you're doing 5 the first year and then 2,
No,
2,
no.
2.
I'm saying the 3 and then the 2 plus 2.
For a total of 5 years.
Really 4 years, because you can do it that last year, you do 3. You end up with 1.
You do 3.
Orphan 1, right? Because you're doing 3 the first year as opposed to 2 the first year and alternative 3.
You do 3 the first year and then for the next 4 years, you do 2 each.
Or do 3 and 2 and 2. Remember, when we talked about it, it really would be 4 years instead of 6.
I don't think that's right. I think he's correct. I think you're wrong in your math. Talking about 3 the first year, then each year after that, 2 more until you have a total of 8 more, which is 4 years more.
For a total of 5.
Total of 5 years,
Yeah.
Correct, Travis?
Something's messy. If I'm doing
So
3 up front versus 2 up front,
So there's 11 total that need,
right,
so we'll do 3 up front this year, leaving 8. So then
Right.
for subsequent years after that will get us,
and the other one was gonna be 2 up front
yes,
and then 2 and 2 and 2.
yes.
And then, but if you look at the payback graphs, they both, alternative 1 and alternative 2, as we've modified it. Payback in 3 years also.
Yeah.
So very similar. Sorry, Director Gray, it gets confusing.
Just to make sure that
I
I'm
know,
clear,
I wanted to make sure staff understood and it will work for the issue. So did I hear that that staff understands and that it does address the issue? Did I hear that from EJ?
That is correct. It would prolong this by an additional 4 years, but we would get through all 11 filters within that timeframe. It would extend this out. It would bring down the cost of what was alternative 2 and alternative 3, which balances out closer to alternative 1. My understanding in addition to that was, oh, go ahead, Director Gray.
No, the delay will not impact our operation, correct?
It won't immediately address, it won't immediately address the issues that were identified, which is the use of potable water. But this is a satisfactory option. Again, it speeds up the two of the additional alternatives, but obviously alternative one, which was staff's recommendation, would be sooner and would have the results immediately.
Not that much difference if you look at the payback between two and the hybrid, and between one and the one we just talked about.
No, I agree with that.
And the one we just talked about takes care of the three that are offline right now immediately. Okay, let's go.
Make sure that I understand one last time.
Hello. I heard somebody say.
Director Gray, go ahead, you're still on.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure it's saving costs because of the extension, and it does not impact operations, correct? That's my question.
That is correct.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Ernie has a question.
I just want to make, because as drafted in the proposals, it says 3 filters now, and it says 11 over 9 years. You're saying 3 filters now, 8 over 5 years would.
4 or 5 years, whatever it is.
5 if it's consistent with how it's being described.
It's the way
Meaning
it's
that
described is 3
3
filters now,
Three
11
plus
over
2
5
plus
years.
2.
Okay, got it. Perfect, thank you.
3 filters now, 11
11
over
over 5 years.
over
Then the
5
second
years.
part of that was that the
Yeah, the
concrete
additive.
repair would be an additive alternative.
Understood.
Just the concrete repair without the other structural improvements.
Yes,
Racing,
okay,
Okay,
so can we take a vote? I promise we get out of here at 4.
Director Don Deere,
Yes.
Director Gloria Gray,
Yes,
Director Harold Williams.
yes.
Vice President Desi Alvarez.
Yes,
President Scott Houston.
okay, so the only items pending are the general manager's activities report. We received a written report. Thank you very much. Do you need to give an oral report?
I have nothing else to report. It's all in there.
Okay. General counsel,
I have nothing to report.
do we have any AB 1234 reporting that we need to do? Board members?
No, thank you.
Okay, we already did closed session. Oh, Director Gray?
oh, I'm sorry, are we at board members' remarks or not?
No, we're coming up to that.
All right, thank you.
Now we are at director's comments and future agenda items. So Director Gray, do you have any comments?
Just thanking staff for all the reports today. It was a very important meeting as they all are, and it was very productive. Thank you, Vice Chair, for stepping in, and it was a very good meeting. Thank you, board members. Thank you.
Any other comments, Director Williams?
Oh, yes, I'd just like to comment, kind of echo what Director Gray said about the vice chair stepping in and doing such a great job.
Director Deere, you have?
I've already given you my comments about how he did. I don't want him to get a big head, so I won't say.
I was gonna say, you guys have been with your time. All right, I don't have any additional comments. This meeting is adjourned.